I'm just going to ask Emer and Finian to turn on their cameras, and we'll get this webinar kicked off. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join our webinar this afternoon on Azure Virtual Desktop. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emer Neelan, and I manage the enterprise sales team here in Viatel. In January of this year, Viatel acquired ActionPoint, and we're delighted to be having our first collaborative customer event today with our partner. Viatel and ActionPoint have had a long-standing business relationship going back many years, so we've delivered multiple solutions for many customers, and we were all very excited when the acquisition happened. So I guess combined, we're now a company that has almost 300 people here in Ireland, and we provide a full range of technology services that will support your business on its digital journey. Our mission is to help your business achieve its greatest potential through the power of technology. So what we want to do today is we want to make this as the webinar as interactive as possible. So there will be polls running throughout the webinar, and any questions that you have, we would ask please that you pop them in the chat, and we will have a Q&A afterwards. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Finian Nally. So Finian is the head of Microsoft solutions within ActionPoint. ActionPoint are a Microsoft Gold partner, and Finian is going to outline the key benefits of Azure Virtual Desktop and how this can enhance your business, both in terms of modernizing your hybrid workplace, but also the efficiencies it can bring in terms of your existing licensing costs. So Finian, over to you.
Thanks, Emer. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see so many people on today's webinar. We've got a lot to go through, so I'll get straight into it. As Emer said, I'm head of Microsoft Cloud Solutions. I'm approximately 20 years in the technology industry. I used to have hair, so it's gradually grown out over those 20 stressful years. But really, I would have a diverse knowledge of Microsoft Cloud services, and I'd focus heavily on conversations around Azure and Microsoft Modern Workplace with our customers. My contact details are there on the screen, both email and Twitter, so feel free to reach out to me at any point if you have any questions. But as Emer said, put questions in the chat box. We'll have a couple of polls throughout this webinar to try and make it interactive, and follow up with us after if you have any more questions. In terms of the content today, really the 5 key areas. We'll do a very, very quick intro, just expanding on what Emer spoke about a second ago. I'm going to talk then about how Azure Virtual Desktop enables hybrid work. We're then going to dive into a little on security insights. I could talk all day about security insights, but we're just going to touch on some key topics around that, specifically related to Azure and Azure Virtual Desktop. From there, we'll talk about infrastructure consolidation, because I know it's top of mind for many organizations. And lastly, then we'll touch on some of the costs and some of the cost strategies around Azure and around cloud migrations. So, as Emer mentioned, ActionPoint is now part of the wider Viatel group. We're made up of a great team of approximately 260 individuals right now. And really, we cover 4 key areas of digital success, from modern networks and security, game-changing software, leading-edge infrastructure, which we're going to talk a lot about today in terms of cloud technology, and all of that backed by a team of top-class digitally skilled engineers to bring your digital transformation and to make it real. Getting under the hood of that team a little bit, our Azure team is fully certified. We've certifications ranging from Azure administration right the whole way through to DevOps and development. And as Emer said as well, we're a Gold Microsoft partner, but we're a Gold Microsoft partner in multiple areas, from cloud and data center right through to modern workplace and 365 and application development. So a very, very broad spectrum in the mix there, and a high degree of skills. So let's get today going. And I suppose really to set the scene, this is a slide I like to use in terms of what does today look like? What does today look like for many organizations and the technology platform that's sitting behind the scenes? Really, we hear the language, things are good enough. We've a lot of legacy systems. We had a technology strategy, but that was thrown out the window a number of years ago with COVID hitting. And what we've seen is fragmentation on the increase. We've seen ourselves as a business adapt to the COVID scenario, to hybrid working, to business growth or contraction. And that has ultimately led to a lot of fragmentation in the mix there. And our technology strategy has really fallen by the wayside. And that is, I think, more compounded by, I suppose, the fact that the modern workplace has fundamentally changed. More and more people are no longer working within the office, and even within the home office, location is almost secondary to where people work. People want to work where they can be effective, be that with their client, in the office, in their home office, in a hotel, in an airport, in the back garden, anywhere where at all. And I think pivotal to that is that our team's expectations have changed. Why do I need to go to the office to work? Or why do I need to go to a certain location to work? And that's something that's really front of mind for many, many organizations. And how do we balance that need and that necessity for individuals and their desire to work in a hybrid fashion with the needs of the organization and with the needs of staff retention on top of that? And looking at that in a little bit more detail, we obviously have those employment needs, around that distributed workforce, but we also have fundamental security and regulation needs. We still have to abide by our industry standards, by government regulations. We still want to protect our data and keep our IP secure. We also want to factor in the business growth. Maybe we've acquired a new business, maybe we've grown significantly, or on the flip side, maybe we've contracted and are getting more and more niche. And how do we balance that combination of not only working with our core staff, but also working with contractors and partners and many, many organizations, which is part and parcel of the hybrid work. But common challenges complicate meeting these needs. We want to address employee experience. Yes, we want to be able to say, yeah, you can work from anywhere, but that's all well and good. If we can't deliver a good experience, then there's going to be pushback against that. Likewise, we want to ensure that data security and compliance are front and center. We cannot enable hybrid working or effective hybrid working while at the same time compromise fundamental data security and compliance needs. And we always have the consistent challenges of connectivity issues, be it through VPN, capacity, broadband issues, and that balanced with the financial constraints of budgeting, skills and resources. How do we make sure that this is going to be working effective for us? Ultimately, we have to chart a course. We've seen over the last number of years, many businesses just navigating for the now, trying to get on their feet, trying to just do things. But I think we're in a place right now where we should be planning for what's next. Many of the organizations we're speaking to on a daily basis are looking to say, well, actually, we've navigated the now, we've done all of that, we've learned a lot, but we're planning for what's next. And the more advanced organizations are actually focusing on shaping the future. And their course is about focusing on business growth and realizing the opportunities that are out there. And with all those things in mind, it brings Azure Virtual Desktop front and center. And Azure Virtual Desktop enables us from a technology platform point of view to chart that course. And it does that in 4 key pillars. First and foremost, delivering a great user experience. Our end users are enabled to work. They want to use the platform. It does this in a modern way by leveraging modern devices and modern technology. In addition, it comes with superior economics, so it's not cost prohibitive, and we're able to balance the cost of this new platform with actual real business growth. And lastly, and I think this is probably one of the most important things, it's secure by design. Security is not an afterthought, and we'll talk about that in a lot more detail in a little while. So if we were to oversimplify things for a second and look at our teams and look at the people within our business, we have various roles within our business, from marketing to finance to engineering and many, many more. And fundamentally, what do those people do? They work on applications, they work on an operating system, they work with data, and they just want to get their job done. So we need to enable that, and we need to leverage Azure Virtual Desktop to be able to do that. And what Azure Virtual Desktop does is it says, well, yes, let's give you your applications, your data, and your full end user experience, regardless of where you are, in that hybrid workplace fashion. So we're delivering a stream desktop to the end user at a time and a place that they need it so that they can work effectively. Getting under the hood a little bit, and let's talk about some of the features within Azure Virtual Desktop and what makes it so great. I touched on this earlier on, but first and foremost is the flexibility of the system. The ability for you to access your applications, work on your data, work the way you want to work from any device, be it a Windows device, an Apple device, Android, different form factors, be it tablet, phone, whatever you want, you're able to access Azure Virtual Desktop and access your key line of business applications and data from any device, regardless of where you are. Secondly, Azure Virtual Desktop is a modern platform. It's not something that's rehashed or enhanced or rebuilt from the past, and many people on this call would have experienced with remote desktop protocol. Azure Virtual Desktop was built from the ground up to completely replace remote desktop protocol. And with that in mind, it looks at how it can leverage many advanced features, from having support for Windows Hello for Business, from being able to adapt dynamically to bandwidth utilization, being able to support multiple devices from printers, multi-touch pens, clipboards, cameras, etc. And also to use modern codecs so that we can use the likes of Microsoft Teams for audio and video and much more throughout. Getting under the hood even further and looking at how does it do that, and how does Azure Virtual Desktop, I suppose, address not only some of the pain points of the past, but also some of the current security concerns we have. And one of the ways it does that is through containerization. Every single user profile is containerized using a technology called FXLogix. What this means, I suppose, and the benefits to the organization and particularly to the end user, is that load times are extremely fast. Gone are the days of a traditional RDS environment where we would have very slow load times, people waiting for 2, 3, 4, and even longer minutes for their profile to load. They were on a certain server, the profile hadn't been, or they hadn't used that server before, so therefore the profile took a while to load. Those issues don't exist with Azure Virtual Desktop because everything is containerized. The benefit on the flip side of that, from a security point of view, is that we now have full siloed user profiles. In other words, the data in my user profile is completely siloed and completely secure from every other user profile. Never the twain shall meet. So in that vein, we're getting out of the box security enhancements as well as those extremely fast login times. I touched on the audio and video enhancements, leveraging the power of Microsoft Teams and Azure Virtual Desktop. The technology is able to actually offload the video and audio onto the local client. So what that means is that we get greater quality, we get increased frame rates, and we get a better user experience. And as well as that, if we want to, we're able to redirect multiple cameras and cope with things like low latency, where in the past there would have been poor audio and video quality. Talking about security, and this is something we'll talk about a fair bit today. I suppose with many of our legacy platforms and legacy approaches to security, security is an afterthought or an add-on. We have our system and we have to go to various vendors and buy different components of security. With Azure Virtual Desktop, security is baked in. It is built in from the ground up. And modern security approaches that we speak to our clients about on a daily basis, such as multi-factor authentication, conditional access, and leveraging the power of the Azure Intelligent Security Graph, are natively part of Azure Virtual Desktop. They are there the second you start to use it. So we're able to get really granular on that control of security, both from the end user spectrum, but also from the admin spectrum as well. This is one of the features that I like best, and in conversations with many organizations, particularly talking with the IT people, when we talk about security, we talk about attack surface reduction. And one of the common ports, port 3389, many people will be familiar with, is a common port that is attacked on a continuous basis because it's wide open. If I want to use an RDS environment, I have to open up port 3389 or an equivalent port for people to access the system. With Azure Virtual Desktop, that doesn't happen. Inbound ports are closed because it's using a technology called reverse proxy technology to access the system. So immediately, by default, we've reduced our exposure to attacks, and we're spending less time looking at what is the traffic on our inbound ports and where is that traffic coming from. And lastly, I suppose it's the headache when something goes wrong. Again, if we think about our more traditional systems, be it Hyper-V or VMware, we have a SAN from one vendor, maybe we have servers on top of that from another vendor, we have networking, we've got lots and lots of layers of complexity in the mix with lots of different vendor types and lots of areas that problems can happen. With Azure Virtual Desktop, because it's a single end-to-end platform, end-to-end diagnostics is built in. I'll touch on that in more details in a little while as to how that actually works. But from a root cause identification, the speed at which we can identify issues and also resolve issues is dramatically improved. So thinking back to the business, we're able to get the business back up and running quicker. We're able to make that end user happier. And ultimately, from an IT point of view, we're going to make that, experience from our IT team much better. So bringing it all together, I suppose Azure Virtual Desktop blends security across the Microsoft ecosystem. It leverages the power within Microsoft 365, both from a security and licensing point of view, pulling in conditional access, pulling in role-based access control. It leverages the overall power of Azure, building on the 90+ compliance offerings that are there, building on the investment in security and modernization that are continuously there on the Azure platform. And it's built from the ground up to have a great user experience and great security using reverse connect technology, Azure AD technologies built in. So in summary about Azure Virtual Desktop, it's a modern solution built for a modern hybrid workforce. Like I said at the very start, it allows you to deliver your applications, your data to that end user when and where they need that. If they're in the office, home office, out on site, with a client, wherever they are going to be able to do their job effectively. We're going to be able to give choice to our users now. It's no longer, well, you're restricted to a desktop in the office. We're going to say, well, regardless of where you are, once you have a device, we can enable that application, be that a low-performing application or a really, really high-performing application like BIM or CAD or something like that. You can use both because everything is happening in the cloud. The cloud is doing the grunt. The cloud is the engine behind it. Your device is mainly just, or is primarily just streaming that information or that view from the cloud. We're ensuring security by design and by default. I think that's a key differentiator there. We're putting security front and center. And we have the flexibility to scale and grow as we need. So with that, I'm just going to put a pause in, and I think we're just going to put up a quick poll. If I can bring that up there.
Yeah, I'll just bring in the poll there, Finian, for you.
Yeah, that's on screen there now.
So I'll just read out the question. How do you rate your current technology approach to hybrid working? And there are 4 options: modern approach, legacy approach, COVID approach, and no approach. So I'll give people maybe 10 or 15 seconds just to get their answers in there. Look, it's good to be able to survey a group and see where people are at. I'll give people a couple of seconds there, and we'll review some of the data a little later. Or Finian, is this something you want to look at now, or wait till the Q&A?
No, let's have a look at the Q&A at the end, kind of thing.
Okay, thank you very much for your feedback, guys.
So moving swiftly on, and I suppose a lot of the topics I'm going to cover in terms of security and infrastructure consolidation are with the kind of an eye on Azure Virtual Desktop, but we don't necessarily need to have Azure Virtual Desktop in play there. Security, as many of you are aware on this call, is something we could talk for hours and days and weeks on, kind of thing. But I wanted to touch on 2 key elements, which I think are pivotal to your cloud journey and pivotal to the adoption of Azure Virtual Desktop. The first one is around identity. Identity is the foundation of good security within Azure. Who has access to what, when, and from where? So if we start to break identity into multiple facets, and the important thing when we look at identity is that we have that initial control. Identity shouldn't be just a username and password. Identity is about where am I coming in from? What geography am I coming in from? What device am I coming in from? Is that a company-owned device, or is that just my own personal device? What is the risk around the location that I'm coming in from? Is there more risk around those kind of things? And when all those signals are put together, we're able to leverage the power of conditional access and Azure Active Directory and say, okay, well, based on the signals, based on the criteria, not just a username and password, we're going to decide whether we're going to allow you access or block your access into a certain system or onto our Azure Virtual Desktop platform. So in that vein, let's look at our end users and to say, well, actually, we want them working from wherever they choose, but we still need to have rules behind that. We still need to have almost a demarcation between saying what's good and what's bad. So if we're using conditional access in the mix here, we can have confidence that, right, our end users are going to gain access easily and seamlessly, but also very, very securely to our Azure Virtual Desktop instance by using conditional access. If we then extend that further and think about our IT roles, the IT admin, I suppose legacy approaches were very much of the approach, well, if you're in IT, well, then you're a global admin. You have access to everything. Those approaches are bad because all it takes is one account to get breached or one IT account to get breached, and the keys to the kingdom are open to everyone. So with Azure and with Azure Virtual Desktop, we take what's called a role-based access control. We still leverage conditional access similar to the end user, but then we decide, okay, well, what is the definition of the IT admin? Are you someone who is just looking at network resources? Or maybe you're someone who's just looking at the Azure Virtual Desktop part of the system, or our databases, or our storage? What is your exact requirements? And based on your requirements, we configure your role-based access. So yes, you're an IT admin, but when you log in with your credentials, you are only going to get access to the things that are relevant to you and the things that you should be looking at. Maybe I'm a support technician and I need to support a couple of areas. Or maybe I'm a database admin and I need to look at the database. So role-based access control allows us to get very, very granular with IT admins. From there, the third strand is really our partners. How do we leverage that? How do we enable secure access for our partners? And it's the same principles. It's taking that conditional access. It's using role-based access controls. In other words, only give them access to what they need. But it's extending that further and it's saying, well, actually, not only should we give them access to certain things, the things that they look after, be it their application, but also that access should be restricted to time windows. We should be able to say, well, actually, if you're coming in, you need to notify us in advance. And we're going to give you a window. Maybe it's 10 o'clock at night till 12 o'clock at night for you to do your work. And after 12 o'clock, the system automatically is going to revoke your access. If you need more access, come back to us and we'll enable a longer window. So we're able to get very, very fine-grained control over our system and almost take back control, where many systems that we see on a regular basis, traditionally on-premise systems and cloud systems can be similar if they're not enabled or if the security is not enabled properly. But we see open access. It's too easy for people to get in and get access to everything. So identity is that foundational security element within Azure. If you get your identity right, you're a long, long way to getting your security right going forward. The second thing is, I suppose, when we're in the cloud, when we've adopted the cloud, what are our security requirements? And really, we can, I suppose, look at three key pillars of that, or try and break it down into three key pillars. One is that we need a security platform that continuously assesses things. It can't just be static. It has to actually inform us and tell us what our security posture is. The second thing is, well, it actually has to be secure. We have to be able to harden our resources and make things more make things more secure, similar to the way we secured our identity a few minutes ago. And lastly, we need to be able to defend and detect threats and attacks. We want to ensure that, right, if someone does gain access or something gains access, that we're alerted to that and we're able to put up a defense against it. And the way we do that in Azure is primarily using Defender for Cloud. Defender for Cloud gives us a single pane of glass for security. Again, thinking back to our current system and our current platforms, often we have many, many panes of glass and many, many different ways of looking at security. And often they're not even visible. You know, we might want to look at a certain aspect of security, but we have no dashboard. We've no way of understanding what's actually going on. With Defender for Cloud, it gives us that single view, and it breaks it into multiple sections. First and foremost, giving us a secure or a score. How secure are we? It's often the question that maybe comes down from the board or from senior management. How secure is our organization? How secure is our platform? Well, we're actually able to rate that by what Microsoft does is it pulls together the signals from all the various items there are things that you have configured, from servers to storage to networking, etc. Puts them all together and goes, okay, well, if you have enabled all the security you should have enabled, you're going to get a great score. But if you haven't enabled that security, you're going to get a lower score. So it allows you to focus much, much more easily on things and say, well, actually, yeah, I want to be secure. Where should I start to work, or where should I start to target? It also looks at what workloads we've got configured and are they protected? Do we have our storage encrypted, for example? Do we have antivirus and anti-malware on our virtual machines, as another example? So again, we can easily hone in or zone in on what's actually going on and address security issues. It takes it a step further as well. Defender for Cloud has regulatory compliance built in. So often when I talk about this, many people go, well, surely Azure has compliance built in. Absolutely. Microsoft has fully compliant data centers with over 90+ compliance certifications. However, when you put when you turn your infrastructure on top of that, it is on you to configure your platform the way you want it. But what Defender for Cloud does is it identifies those security and compliance standards. So for example, if I say, well, our business needs to be ISO 27001 certified, the Defender for Cloud is going to identify any areas where you have not reached 27001 in terms of your technology configuration. Maybe you've forgotten to configure encryption on certain drives. Maybe you've given single-factor authentication access to some users. It's going to identify those and goes, okay, you need to remediate the following in order for your platform to be fully ISO 27001 compliant, or PCI or NIST or whatever the standard is appropriate to you. So back to the point in terms of how secure am I? Defender for Cloud, built in as part of Azure Security, is giving you that visibility, giving you that insight, but also giving you that ability to take action to improve security and make it much, much better. Next, I'm going to talk a little about infrastructure consolidation. And I'm conscious I did a sweeping summary of security there, but I'm I'm happy to do a deeper dive with anyone after if they want to go talk a lot more about security. But when we look at infrastructure consolidation and think about our journey to the cloud, often the first step for many people is to lift and shift. Well, let's take what we have, let's lift it up, and let's shift it across and move it into the cloud. But from time and time again, when I look at customers' infrastructure, we see the common things come up. We see jump boxes and many virtual machine jump boxes having been built for external access. We see lots and lots of management servers and reporting servers for IT to use to report on what's going on there. We see log servers in place, taking log sources from different locations. And particularly in an RDS environment, which I'll focus on in a second, we see lots and lots of management infrastructure in play there. All of this is noise almost. It's IT functions, it's enabling the services behind the scenes, but it's extra overhead. It's extra virtual machines for us to patch. It's extra virtual machines for us to manage. And when we start to move to cloud, as a matter of fact, it's extra cost. We need to be conscious of the costs that these things are going to impact on. So taking an approach in that lift and shift vein, how do we start to consolidate things? How do we start to eliminate almost unnecessary virtual machines? So looking at remote desktop and traditional remote desktop as an example. In traditional remote desktop, there are many layers, from our web access layers to our RD gateway at the very start. Often these are load balanced, multiple virtual machines. Although they may be small in size, they're still virtual machines that need to be managed with complex networking behind it. A layer below that, we have our RD connection broker, often with a SQL database and sometimes with a clustered SQL database behind it. And right down at the bottom, then we have our licensing server and other pieces of infrastructure around that. When really the only piece that our end user actually interacts with is this piece in the middle, is our session hosts and our application servers. And that's almost the most important thing from an end user's point of view. But yet, as IT professionals, we need to manage all of this above and below the fold. When we move to the cloud and when we move to something like Azure Virtual Desktop, we essentially eliminate all of those functions. And all of those functions are delivered natively by the platform. We have web access, we have gateway, we have brokers, we have licensing, but we've no servers. All of those are just taken care of by the platform and automatically scale, automatically work. And then we can focus very easily on actually our session hosts and our application servers. That's all we need to worry about. So immediately, if we take a step back one slide, we've taken out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different roles, and many servers can be instantly taken out by adopting Azure Virtual Desktop. So we've gone a good first step in consolidating our infrastructure. The second thing is jump boxes. And again, this is something we see regularly, is that we have a jump box for someone to get external access. In other words, we've restricted access down. We've done our networking very well, but we have ourselves or a third party needs access into certain virtual machines to upgrade applications or to do maintenance or something along those lines. And jump boxes are put in place to do that. Again, that creates an external open port. It creates a virtual machine that can be compromised, and it is a virtual machine that needs to be patched and managed as part of our ecosystem. With Azure, we can completely eliminate jump boxes, and we're able to use a technology called Azure Bastion. It has the same net effect as a jump box, but it is not a virtual machine. It is not a virtual machine that we need to manage or patch. Also, from a security point of view, we're not opening up any external ports. We're using our standard port 443 for secure and encrypted access. So again, we've reduced our infrastructure footprint, we've reduced our IT complexity, but we've also enhanced our security in one fell swoop. Looking at things from a management, reporting and logging point of view, and I mentioned this briefly earlier on, Azure Monitor gives, I suppose, an all-encompassing suite of tools to be able to do that, to be able to monitor our applications, our operating systems, the resources that we have in Azure, be it Azure Virtual Desktop or other, our Azure subscription, our identity, our role-based access control, to monitor and take all the logs from that, but also to be able to report back on them, to be able for us to visualize that information and to be able to analyze that information. And it gives us all of this tooling, again, without any servers. So we can decide, okay, well, what level of logging do we need? What level of monitoring do we need? And what level of insights do we need on top of that? But we don't have the headache of worrying about, well, do we need to manage 1, 2, 3, or many, many more servers to be able to enable that? And lastly, file servers and even SQL servers, we have scope to eliminate them as well. If we look at something like Azure Files can give us more or less the same experience as a normal file server. So if we look at, for the majority of companies, what does a file server actually do? Well, it has network shares on it and it allows our end users to access files. That's pretty much it in most cases. Azure Files allows us to do that exact same thing using SMB 3.0 protocols. So we're able to deliver shares to users or to applications or to wherever it's needed. Again, without that overhead of a virtual machine to manage and that extra infrastructure to look at. So there's much, much more we can do in addition to that. We can go far beyond that in terms of SQL servers, many, many more applications. But often these top elements here from the RDS management layer, the jump boxes, and the management and logging servers are the quick wins. They're almost the easy things that we can say, well, actually, do you know what? When we're doing our lift and shift as part of our first step, we don't need to bring them with us. They can all be eliminated. We can reduce that overhead and we can deliver benefits back to the organization at the same time. The last thing I want to touch on today is around costs, because this is where lots of complexity can come into the mix. And often when people go, well, how much is Azure? Or how much is a virtual machine in Azure? You know, that's not a straight answer to it. And there are many, many strategies as to how we look at costs within the cloud. So I want to touch on some of them over the next couple of slides. So looking at our traditional infrastructure and traditional approaches to the cost of traditional infrastructure, it's made up of many elements. Our traditional IT pieces, our SANs, our servers, all of those kind of things. But often we forget about the other elements, the building costs, the power costs, the management, the people costs, the networking costs, the DR costs, the cooling costs, and much, much more. If we're on an on-premise, we have to consider all of those as part of the true cost of the solution. If we're in a data center, we also have the additional cost of, well, maybe we're renting a rack, maybe we're renting half a rack, and are we actually using that full entitlement? Maybe we're only using a fraction of it, but we're still paying for the rest of it. You know, we're paying for 3 megawatts, and we might only be using 1. And also looking at our actual server capacity. We provision servers because we have the space to do it. But are we actually using them? And typically, you know, I think this is an industry standard number. When we look at the actual utilization time of servers, it's in around 30% for an average server. So we have 70% of that server from a CPU and RAM point of view, just sitting idle, doing nothing, but yet we had to pay for it. And how did we pay for it? Well, we paid for it through a CapEx model. We had to think upfront to go, well, what does our business look like today? And what's it going to look like in 3, 4, 5 years' time from a usage and growth point of view? And too often that's just a finger in the air number and we're guessing. Whereas with a cloud model, it's fully OpEx from the get-go. So we're only ever paying for what we use. Thinking along that vein, that gives us scope then to almost split our costs in two. We have our during migration costs. In other words, right, how much is this going to cost us based on our estimates, based on what infrastructure we're bringing off, based on the services that we're going to use and how we're going to use it. What is our cost going to be? But the cost conversation doesn't stop there. And that's something that often gets missed for many organizations, is that it does stop there when we talk about cloud. Leveraging the power of Azure and leveraging particular components such as Azure Advisor, we need to monitor costs on a continuous basis, because our organization is moving, our organization is evolving, and the workloads that are within our organization are changing consistently. So if we're monitoring that on a regular basis, we're actually able to shape and adapt our cost throughout the year or throughout the business's lifespan. So we're able to dynamically increase and decrease and control our costs in a much more agile fashion than we've ever had before with a traditional CapEx and on-prem environment. One of the things we look at is the utilization, like I mentioned earlier on, and we start to profile our workloads and say, well, we've got X amount of virtual machines with 30% or lower utilization. Well, let's size them properly. Let's put them on the right size. They don't need to be on super high spec virtual machines. They need to be on the right size ones. Likewise, we will have some workloads that are peaking at times. Well, let's look at when they're peaking. Maybe it's end of year or end of month, or maybe it's when certain report jobs are run or when certain batch jobs are run. Well, let's burst them. Let's expand them. Let's increase the resources available to those virtual machines only at that point in time. So we pay for what we need when we need it. And lastly, all the white space, the bits that we don't need, well, we actually don't need to provision that in the cloud. So if we plan our environment effectively, but not only plan it, monitor the continuous usage in the cloud, we're able to manage our cost effectively. We're also able to do other things straight out the gate, and this is something that gets very interesting, is when we start to use something called Azure Reserved Instances and Azure Hybrid Use Benefits. So what is an Azure Reserved Instance? Well, essentially you're committing to use a certain resource for a period of time. You're committing to use a certain type of virtual machine for a period of 1 year or 3 years. And by doing that, you're getting savings very easily. In addition, if you have your own existing Microsoft licensing, which many organizations have, you're able to bring that with you and use that in the cloud. So leveraging the power of reserved instances and Azure Hybrid Use Benefits, there can be cost savings of up to 80% against standard pay-as-you-go costs. And again, they're not something you have to commit to initially. They're something that as you understand your cloud environment, you're going to figure out how to use that better. And how do we get that understanding? Well, again, similar to the security pane of glass that I showed earlier on, Azure has tools for cost management built in as well. And one of those is around Azure Advisor, saying, well, what is the utilization? How do I figure out if I can get more bang for my buck, if I can be more cost effective on Azure? And what Azure Advisor does, it surfaces that for you. It says things like, hey, look at this server here. Your average CPU usage is less than 5%. You're clearly on a VM that's too high spec in here. Let's change that down. Let's change it down to something lower spec. And you have the potential to save this amount of money. And that could be done for virtual machines, for databases, and many more resources in Azure. So we're able to look at not only the start of the journey, but also during the journey as well, and during your evolution of the cloud, how we manage that cost effectively. So I suppose in the time we had today, I spoke about an awful lot, and I realize I spoke about it at a very high level. But no migration is ever linear or simple. And I suppose at ActionPoint and Viatel, what we do best is helping you navigate that. And our team use this kind of mantra, or this kind of model through helping businesses adapt to the cloud, because there's many components to it. There's the components we touched on at the start, the end user experience, the applications and the data you want to deliver to them. There's the pieces around security and the puzzles around that. There's the element of the cost control. But then taking it right back to the very start, there's your actual business strategy. Is this the strategy for your business? And what is the strategy for your business? And how can we go and take that further? So following this path is what we follow for many of our customers' journey. We don't necessarily take the same path every time or touch on every aspect of this, but it's something we're very used to doing and something we're more than happy to help everyone in this call with. So with that, I suppose I'm going to stop, because I know I've been talking for almost 40 minutes straight, and we'll hand it over to Q&A.
Thanks a million, Finian, and a very comprehensive presentation on cloud migration and Azure Virtual Desktop. So appreciate you taking the time today. I'm just going to kick it off. I'm still waiting for a few questions to come in. I might just run a quick poll before we do that. Pretty simple one, really. It'd be good to get some feedback from the audience. Let me just load that up here. So have you started your cloud journey? So there's 2 yeses, 2 nos, but just slight variances. So yes, we're a cloud first organization. Yes, but we're unsure how to get the best from cloud. No, but we know we have to start embracing it, and we're not really sure where to start. And the final one is no, we're unsure about the costs and or security. So I'm going to take a couple of seconds there to get some of those poll responses in, and we'll kick off some of the Q&A. So a question here from John Finian. So can consolidation benefits of I need to just read this first. Can consolidation benefits of move to cloud, no jumps, no log servers, no management stuff be realized if your environment is Linux based?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's interesting when we talk about Microsoft Azure is there's a somewhat misnomer that you need to be on Windows to leverage Microsoft Azure. As a matter of fact, I think it's about 52%, I think is the figure Microsoft used, 52% of workloads on Azure are actual Linux-based workloads. So I suppose first and foremost, it's about right sizing. You know, you're going to get bang for your buck because you're using Linux workloads. You need to right size them. But then it's to look at, you know, you're saying you've no jump boxes, no log servers. It's to look at your infrastructure as a whole. Do you have other things in the mix there? Maybe there's physical firewalls. Maybe there's elements of networking that you're managing right now. And there certainly is scope to consolidate and enhance how you're doing things. So like we said at the end there, every journey is different. And while you may not have some elements of infrastructure, you may have others.
Thanks for that, Finian. I hope that answers your question, John. Just looking here at the poll, Finian, it's some interesting results. I think we can have a conversation about them, but it's a fairly straightforward question. Have you started your cloud journey? And if we just look at some of the responses, almost half are in the yes bracket, but we're unsure how to get the best from the cloud. What's your experience of that, or what are you seeing out there at the moment?
Yeah, I think I suppose it lines up almost exactly with what we're seeing there. It's that everyone has started their cloud journey. Many organizations have adopted things like Microsoft 365. They've migrated their email. They're using Teams. And look, they're using other services as well, the likes of Zoom and Dropbox and all things like that. And I kind of alluded to it at the start, is that the expectation from your team is that you should be cloud first and that they're using cloud technologies on a day-to-day basis. But the challenge remains, you know, we're unsure about how to get the best from the cloud. And I think, again, back to that navigation slide, the previous slide there, it is challenging. There's a lot going on there. And that's where organizations like ourselves come in. We've, I suppose, got a team together that are delivering solutions like this on a regular basis. And with any solution, be it you know, a migration to the cloud or adopting a new application, you need to bring in the experts. If you want to do it right, if you want to do it effectively, you need to bring in the experts. But it's not a, you know, it's not a dark art, or it's not something that you can just look away from. I think migrating to the cloud and adopting the cloud is something that you need to be part and parcel of, and that a good partner will bring you on that journey successfully and help you and your team get educated on the benefits at the same time as the implementation or migration is happening.
Brilliant. So I've another couple of questions after coming in here. So John's back to us. What is your view on using non-Microsoft technology for firewall devices, SonicWall, Cisco, etc.? Are you better off using the Microsoft firewall, especially for VoIP apps?
It's really preference, I suppose. It's company preference. So, you know, we have companies that are using the cloud on it's just Microsoft. It's Azure Firewall. It's all the Microsoft native technologies end to end. We've other companies who are using the likes of Cisco Meraki or virtual appliances. We're using Sophos or SonicWall virtual appliances. It's down to what you're using in your business and what you're comfortable with, what your security protocols are. You know, there's no kind of right or wrong. It's about making the informed decision and going, well, you know what, we've used Meraki end to end for all our locations. Well, there's no good reason why you would suddenly decide to change that when you move to the cloud. You stick with what you know and then you adapt in time. You may decide in future to say, yeah, well, actually, we've decided the Microsoft solution is better or is giving us more benefits for whatever reason. And absolutely, you can change. So there's no, I suppose, right and wrong. I suppose it's the kind of back to the I'm watching Dopesick on Disney, or not Dopesick, it's The Dropout. I'm watching on Disney at the moment, and they use the line in it, the Yoda line, do or do not. So just make sure you do something when you're doing security, and especially with firewall.
Very good. Nice, nice link in there with Yoda. Stephen McCracken, good to see you, Stephen. He's on the webinar here. He's got a question. We use 10 client PCs with Azure RDS servers, but that does not allow webcams to work with Teams or Zoom. Would Virtual Desktop fix that?
That's an it depends response, Stephen, unfortunately. So it depends on the device you're using. So again, legacy devices may not support the protocols there. Modern devices, I think iGel is one that comes to mind, absolutely support all of that. So again, it's just down to the certification of the device and how old the device is.
Yeah, you just followed up there. We use iGel.
Yeah. So yeah, again, depending on the model, it should support it. I mentioned at the start about multiple device. I think one of the key things there is the HTML5 support. So if it supports that, yeah, there shouldn't be an issue. But again, it's something we can take offline.
Definitely. Thank you, Stephen. Question here from Damien. Could we utilize this platform for DR? If so, is it cost effective as a potential DR solution?
Absolutely, yeah. It's something that we have spoken to some clients about in terms of having a cloud hot site. You know, what is a cloud hot site? Well, a traditional hot site approach was that you rented space in an office miles and miles away from your primary office that had lots of PCs or thin clients sitting there idle, just waiting for your office to burn down, essentially, or waiting for the day when you told all the staff, well, it's a disaster scenario, go there. Taking that approach from an Azure Virtual Desktop point of view, what you can do is say, okay, well, let's back up or let's move all our images to Azure. We still have our on-prem, or we still have our core infrastructure wherever it is, but we have an Azure Virtual Desktop instance sitting beside it with maybe one session host. And then if disaster happens, then what we can easily do is we can spin up multiple more session hosts, and your end users can then work from wherever they are. So in the context of disaster recovery and maybe more so business continuity, absolutely. And we've had discussions with customers on leveraging Azure Virtual Desktop to do just that. And ultimately, for some customers, it becomes a case of, well, this isn't just business continuity. It actually becomes business as usual to say, well, you know, we've sweated our on-premise environment in full, and now we've decided ultimately we're going to move fully to or change Azure Virtual Desktop from being a business continuity / DR solution into our full-blown production solution. So I hope that answers that question, Damien.
Perfect. Thanks, Finian. I'm just throwing up some feedback polls which people can access through the polls tab on their Teams window there. Just looking for some feedback on the webinar, etc. But we're also offering a free one-to-one AVD consultation with ActionPoint. So if you'd like to sign up for that, please do let us know, and we'll be happy to arrange a call with Finian and the team shortly after the webinar here today. And if I just have a quick look to see if there's any more questions coming in. No, I think you've covered them all, Finian. So
that's great. And we've given everyone 10 minutes back, so it's good.
Excellent. Yeah. So enjoy your lunches, and we will see you all very soon, I'm sure. Thank you, Finian, and thank you for Emer for today's introduction. And the recording of this will be available via email later on this afternoon. So thanks very much. Take care.